I'm going to try the wiring harness to at least get it started today. We bought this originally for my other 4-door, and I've opened it, was pretty excited about it whenever we got it in, along with a box of other Dan Chuck parts and classic Chevy parts and all these other places we order from. But anyway, opened it, looked at the instructions, and realized pretty quick this was not something that I really wanted to jump on with the other car, so I quickly put it back up. We ordered a bunch of small parts for the interior here recently, including matching keys for the doors and trunk and glove box and ignition. And upon me getting ready to put the ignition key back in along with new hardware, we discovered that a lot of those plugs were partially burnt, and didn't really want to spend the time and the money to get this thing right, to get it lined out, running, driving, and have a car fire. So I told my father, you know, we'll just use this harness. It converts for an alternator, which we've already put on here. My other car still has the generator that I was able to get rebuilt for dirt cheap. I think it was like $60, and it's completely all original. So I'm just leaving it be. It runs fine. I'm just having a little bit of a regulation issue with it. It's not wanting to charge or regulate, whatever you want to call it. So it's patiently waiting at my grandfather's in his garage. But I guess I'm going to try and look up on the harness, look up online and look at the harness and see about getting started. The only thing that I have going for me that most people would not is that right here at the firewall where it comes out, we are going to cut it and put quick connects, like cat plugs on the Caterpillars, to where whenever my dad's ready, he could buzz a few bolts out and take the whole front clip off, rather than try and fight pulling the engine and transmission through the hood, because that's terrible. And once you get it to where it's kind of easy on, easy off, it's much simpler. So technically I can just go ahead and lay the whole front end out. I have new grommets that are in the trunk, and cut it, but I'm going to try and see if I can do it the way it's supposed to go. No guarantees there. I guess we'll see. So I'll get to reading on this, and then get a fan turned on, just block out the audio, probably speed the video up, and see where we get. There's no guarantees we'll get anywhere today, but it's a shot. So yeah. Okay, I'm amazed at the difficulty at this, to me, but this is a pain in the butt. Thank God for video editing, because this took me probably 30 minutes. Now, this sits in here like so. There's obviously 2 screws in the top, but there's studs on the back side here and where my pinky is that are 3/8. And what makes this hard is that this gigantic speaker sits in the way. I had to unbolt it from the bottom. There's 2 bolts down here, and then, you know, whenever you take the 2 out of the bezel, it takes these loose, these 2 loose. And I had to shift this thing back and forth to try and get in here with well, socket and a nut driver. One side I could get with a nut driver, the other side I had to use a socket and ratchet on. I'd like to go ahead and pull this speaker out. I'm almost certain that it doesn't work. It is 2 times fold and then some, as old as me. I guess I'm going to fight with this just a little more, see if I can get this out, and I'll probably go ahead and pull the radio out, because all that's going to have to be replaced anyway, and go ahead and pull the bezel out over here, and once I do, I'll be back, and we'll start trying to see about pulling some wiring through. Finally got the gauge cluster out, the speaker out, the radio out. I would definitely recommend, if anyone is going to be changing a wiring harness in these, to go ahead and pull the glove box liner. I just put that in and had no idea we were going to do this, and it was such a pain that I didn't want to pull it out. It does slide and drop through here. It's just a little tricky to do. The speaker's a pain in the ass. And the gauge bezel is not too bad. Now on the radio, all I had to do was loosen up the 2 nuts for the turn knobs, the dial knobs, and it just shoved back, and then it had 2 wires that ran over this way. I've got to figure out what those were, but on this here, it had 2 bolts, 2 screws up top. I pulled the metal cover off. It was one Allen head style bolt that was stripped. I'll have to order a new one, and it pulled this off, this here. It was set, I think it was like this actually. Pulled that loose, and then on the factory bezel, this piece sat in it. I just picked it up slightly, it slid up and then out. Allowed the access to these two screws here. Took those out, and then the bezel pulled itself out, and I disconnected all the wiring. Now that said, there's not a whole lot to it, but it all looks like absolute crap. I have discovered that the wiring runs in two directions. One through the main grommet in the firewall, which is right here. I've already pulled the grommet out. I have a new one. The wiring is cut because, like I said, we were planning on putting plugs, cat plug in it, or a quick connect plug. And then part of the wiring runs through here. Now this is part of the, that's delightful, part of the ignition wiring. It runs to the key. I guess the next step is going to be laying the harness out and trying to figure out where to go from there. As of now, all of this from, let's see, about here has to run through the firewall. This is the dimmer switch. That's the relay, alternator, driver's side headlight and ground, passenger side headlight and ground. And then the rest of this is going to be gauge cluster, wiring, lighting, etc., and ignition. So I shot my buddy Caleb a message. He's supposed to be coming by eventually, but until then, I guess I'll mess with this in my own time. I've had that for a while. That's what I've been doing my YouTube videos with.
I don't want to be on your dude, bro.
You have a beard that covers half your face.
Yeah, well, you know, screw you guy.
You could literally be the ugliest son of a bitch in the world, and I think you'd be okay as far as the GoPro goes.
Okay.
Okay, before we go any farther, I've got everything ready to start hooking this back up, but I wanted to go ahead and take this loose, change all these bulbs out, make sure all the contacts are good, because I'd rather not have to pull this out again. As well as I have a new temp sensor because I cut this one, so yeah. Here goes nothing. All right, I've gotten to the point to where before I put the cluster back in, I wanted to replace the bulbs to make sure that they all worked, check all the connections, etc. I went to O'Reilly's here in town, and they have some bulbs, but I wanted to upgrade them to LED just to increase visibility a little bit, brightness, and prolong the life. They didn't have that, so my buddy Caleb and I, we ordered some online that will be in. I also had to make a parts order. I have to order another harness. Apparently it didn't come with this one, and that's all right, but I wish I would have paid more attention. But for now, like I said, because we're waiting on some parts, I'm going to go ahead and end the episode. I feel like I got a good bit done today, though. I figured out where all the wiring goes. I have figured out what I needed to finish it. Aside from a replacement radio and speaker, which are a little pricier and not really important at the moment. All of my dash wiring will be finished up to the hood. Now, obviously, the only thing left wiring-wise will be this, and it runs from here to the back of the car. I'll probably go ahead and replace these just to be sure. I think on my other car they're bad, so, you know, just a precaution. Got a good bit of the harness done. Figured out where everything goes. Tried to tie everything in. Hopefully by next episode, which will be about 2 weeks from now because I'm only off every other weekend. Caleb and I will have this tied together, filmed, and on to something else. I suspect by then it will probably be the ignition system on the engine and a few small things to hook the throttle cable and such up. And we'll see about trying to bust the car off finally. So, yeah, thanks for watching.